Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the ACE Report. I'm your host, Nick Lawrence, and I'm here with Dr. Lou Cuthbert from ACE, the Alliance for a Clean Environment. A little bit later on, Donna Cuthbert will be with us as well. And the topic tonight is family emergency planning for a Limerick nuclear disaster. Why and how? Certainly some important information, and we hope you stay tuned with us throughout the entire show this evening. Lou, where do you want to get started tonight?
Let's start with the why.
Okay.
And try to convey to our viewers and across this community how important it is to think about being prepared for an emergency should it happen at the Limerick nuclear plant. A couple of things that have happened recently help us explain to people as we go throughout the community talking about this issue, Nick, why we need to start taking control of our own readiness, if you will, preparedness, because if something goes wrong, we've said in previous programs, we're largely on our own. Those of you who are watching this program are going to have to make your own choices, your own decisions, and the better prepared you are, the less risk you face, and the better the outcome is likely to be. So just as a backdrop here, Nick, I want to talk a little bit about why the government is not protecting us adequately. And if you just take a quick look at history and factor that in with a little bit of common sense, which apparently and sadly seems to be in short supply right now in a lot of arenas, including the environment and nuclear power in this country, the government has not really done a very good job. We've talked in some previous programs about Chernobyl, TMI, and Fukushima. Those are three really powerful examples of how things can go wrong, and when they go wrong, it gets bad quickly for a whole lot of people. And if you sit at home or in your office knowing that there's something happening and just wait for the government to come to the rescue, that's very unlikely that that's going to happen.
Lou, do we have short memories about these things? It just seems like that people, as soon as a disaster seems to have passed, people then put it on the back burner. It just seems, TMI is a long time since it's happened here in the United States, but Fukushima is relatively recent, within a year, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it seems like we forget these things, and then the government forgets things about what we should be doing for ourselves.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Nick. I think media plays a role here. The story of the day, the hot topic du jour, after an event has occurred, it's out of the public view, out of public conscience. The media moves on to something else.
They do.
And I like to try to be as gracious as I can with government agencies and officials, but it's becoming more and more difficult to do that. I frequently say that a lot of officials and agencies practice selective amnesia.
Yeah, exactly.
They know full well what they're doing and what the possible risks are, and they're willing to take those risks. I think people who are watching this program need to understand that the government and the industry, in this case the nuclear industry, is willing to take a risk with your life, your family, your home, your future, all of it. And we know that we can't necessarily count on the government to protect us. We've I think demonstrated in some previous programs that we can't trust the industry. They've had a pattern of deceit, of telling half-truths, myth-truths, untruths, and just flat-out lies. And I think in some cases we even pointed out what we referred to as some whoppers.
Right,
and we're not talking about a sandwich
No,
here.
exactly, you're right. Right.
If something happens here, Nick, what's happened over the last 10, 15 years, 20 years has raised the stakes. The risks are greater than ever. We're talking about 8 million people living within 50 miles of this plant.
Wow.
Today.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would have realized there are that many people within 50 miles.
Not at all. Now, some people are still talking about, 10 miles is plenty. Well, once again, wrong is my response. We're talking about nearly 300,000 people within 10 miles of the Limerick plant. If you look at the example in Fukushima, there were a lot of people who were evacuated, about 150,000 people within 12 miles. and a lot of people just left on their own. And basically, part of our message for people with this program and with workshops that we do that we'll be talking about throughout the hour is, you may have to make up your own mind, make your own decision, have your own plan, be prepared, and either shelter in place or evacuate based on what you think is in your best interest and the safety of your family's
So
best
within
interest.
12 miles of Fukushima, there were 150,000 people that were evacuated, but
correct.
within 10 miles of the nuclear power plant here, there are 300,000 people.
That's correct. That's
Well,
correct.
I mean, to me, that's a scary number. First of all, we saw the devastation created by Fukushima and people leaving and can never go back to their homes or anything like that. And now we're talking about double the population here, and it doesn't seem like people are as concerned as they should be.
Well, absolutely. You're absolutely correct, Nick. And I think one of the things that has happened here is we've been lulled into a false sense of security. So the myth of safety that has been promoted around nuclear power and the Limerick nuclear power plant is a very dangerous myth because if something goes wrong, there'll be a whole lot of people out there who are not going to do very well. One of the things that we learned from Fukushima and also from the predecessor events in Chernobyl and TMI is that notifications are really slow to come. And that's by intent, that's by design. And we know that Exelon as a corporation has had some problems elsewhere, Braidwood, Illinois being their largest problem that has come to light and been revealed. But we just had a problem in March of 2012 with a large radioactive spill that nobody in this community knew about for 23 days. 23 days, Nick.
I don't know how they can even justify any of this stuff. I sit here with my mouth closed because I can't understand how that can possibly be when they're supposedly, and the NRC is supposed to be protecting us, the government is supposed to be protecting us, informing us so we can make an informed decision as to what we want to do for ourselves, and they wait 23 days.
Well, in essence, what they've done is that they've taken informed consent off the table. I mean, nobody in this community agreed to be a subject of an experiment.
Right, exactly.
And nobody in this community agreed to have information withheld for any period of time, much less 23 days or longer. We have no assurance whatsoever based on past history and the track record of the industry, the government agency, and this particular company at this particular site here in Limerick, that we're going to have anything approximating reasonable or timely or full disclosure of information, because it hasn't happened yet. So, to sit at home or to sit at work or to sit in some community meeting somewhere after you've taken a donation from Exelon saying, oh, there's nothing to worry about, perfectly safe. You've bought into the myth and you have taken an enormous risk by doing so.
So, I was thinking about this, and I don't know whether this is the time to bring it up, but let me bring it up. To my knowledge, and maybe you and Donna have more knowledge about this, has there ever been a mock evacuation done? Has there ever been an evacuation simulation, in the sense as to what would happen? We get these notifications every year about where you should go and what this would happen if this would happen. But has there ever actually been a mock evacuation?
Not a full one that I'm aware of anywhere in the United States.
Wouldn't that make sense, though, to have some idea of actually whether the plans that they put into place actually can work or would work?
Now that's a novel idea, Nick. Thanks for bringing that up. That's a perfect example, I think, of part of this myth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are people who have these plans, and you don't have to worry about this, Mr. and Mrs. Citizen, because they know what they're doing. Well, I'm sorry, but major federal agencies have not inspired confidence in anybody. I mean, all you have to do is take a look at Katrina. In a word, look at Katrina.
Right, exactly.
Or look at Chernobyl, or look at Fukushima, and the answer is, why would you trust, rely on, or wait for a government agency to come to the rescue? Because in many cases, they've demonstrated and also admitted, Nick, that they're much more interested in avoiding a panic than helping people.
And I think we can assume that from this, when we have three distinct places, let's say TMI's in the United States, Chernobyl's in Russia, and Fukushima's in Japan,
Right.
that no government, in a sense, protects their people.
Oh, yeah.
We can only think about our own government, but the point is, it sounds like that other governments are doing exactly the same thing that we do, not here to protect their citizenry, although they have these things in place that supposedly will protect us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't own the market on ineffective
Right.
or impotent government. We just seem to have spent a lot of time, energy, and money perfecting it as an art form, according to a lot of critics.
Right, it certainly seems
A lot
like
of
that.
critics. I think a lot of things that have become pretty obvious is that evacuation plans, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more depth in this program, have been illusions, paper tigers, myths that people have bought into, false assurances, and people then can turn off, the message and not think about it, not worry about it. There are a lot of people who assume that there are viable, detailed, specific operational evacuation plans in place that are going to be in for a very large shock. I mean, we learned by talking to some emergency planners that there really aren't very many resources out there that would be useful immediately in the event of a major
Well,
disaster.
I'm also wondering if any of these programs or plans that they have in place take into account the human factor. Maybe they're expecting people to act in a very rational, reasonable way, but if people feel that they're under threat because of nuclear radiation exposure, they may not do that. So I'm wondering if those plans actually take into account the human psychology and how people panic and get fearful when they're not exactly sure of what's going on.
Right, or take ownership, as we're hoping.
Or take ownership, right.
As we're hoping people will do after they've seen this program and built their own plan. I'm sure that there's some acknowledgement that Plan A is not going to work as designed. I mean, I know some planners in the governmental sector and in the educational sector, as a former superintendent of schools, who would say, yeah, there are plans, but they're in 3-ring binders and they're sitting on shelves somewhere. And
Exactly,
and
yeah.
if the worst case occurs, that plan is not going to operate the way it's written and sitting on a shelf somewhere. So yeah, there's an acknowledgement. There's a general understanding. I mean, just talking to drivers, and we've had this conversation before, bus drivers have admitted to a lot of officials, including school officials and county officials, that if the plan calls for 2 runs, some of them are not coming back for the second run. So,
Really?
Yeah, I mean, some of them have actually said that on the record. So if that happens, then officials, county, state, federal, and school district are going to have to figure out, okay, what happens to all the rest of those children, to all the rest of those students. So the best designed plan at a large scale focus is doomed from the start. I mean, it is just simply not going to work. All you have to do is take a look at 422 on any given day and ask yourself, what happens if there's a problem?
If everybody in
Yeah,
the area
yeah.
tries to get on 422.
Sure,
So I
exactly.
was thinking, you made an interesting point there about when you were in education, that schools have these copies of plans, but how many of the people actually, are the teachers schooled in what to do? Are the administrators schooled in what to do? Are the kids schooled into what to do? Is what will happen? Have they done, as I suggested earlier, some type of a mock evacuation if something such as a disaster from the power plant actually takes place? They're sitting on the shelf, like you said, gathering dust. Right. Do people actually know what's in those things and what to do?
In my judgment, Nick, the answer is some do, most don't. The vast majority would not have any idea what to do if a worst case scenario happens.
Pretty scary, isn't it?
Well, it really is. And I think part of our message, Nick, for our viewers is, rather than be upset or frightened or scared or panicked, you're far better off if you decide to create your own plan, which we're going to talk about in terms of the nuts and bolts during this program, so that you have a much better chance to reduce your risk, to avoid that much more radiation exposure and that much more damage to you and to